Well, I was born in Portland, Oregon in 1942, lived there till I went in the Marine Corps, moved over here to Bend in 2004. I spent 10 years in the Marine Corps and 8 years as a Secret Service agent. The big thing looking towards the future was electronics and computers and all that. So I thought, well, maybe if I went in the military, I could get some specialized training in that field, and then when I came out, why I would have a skill set that I could use and get a good job perhaps. My father had been in the Navy, and my older brother was in the Navy at the time, and I didn't want to be out in the ship all the time. I wanted to be closer to my family, so I thought the Marine Corps would be a good choice. I started my career as a private, and 10 years later when I left, I was a captain. After basic school, I did have orders to go to Vietnam to be assigned to the 1st Recon Battalion. And as a second lieutenant, I was a platoon leader. And I get a mission order, you're going out patrol 2 days on the 25th. We loaded up into our helicopter and went out to where we were supposed to be inserted into the jungle area. We move out through this very tall elephant grass, about 10 feet tall, and we heard some noise up ahead of us and stopped, and I could tell that it sounded like birds, but somebody was trying to sound like a bird and send signals or something. And we heard them coming down and just totally encircling us. Things were getting rather dire. Nobody had shot or anything, but they knew exactly where we were. And they surrounded us, basically. We really felt like we probably weren't gonna, see the sun go down that day. We all opened fire, and we did fight our way back, and it got to be a big grenade throwing contest, and North Vietnamese soldiers on one side of us were throwing grenades up. We could see them going over us and landing on their, they didn't have very good communication with each other, and they were killing themselves, basically. The Marine next to me was killed, and I was wounded. My radio operator was wounded, and the corpsman was wounded, and a couple of others, but we were just being hit with grenade fragments, so nobody got shot or anything. My corpsman, even though he was wounded, he was trying to do CPR on my Marine who I knew was dead. And I kind of pulled him away, and I said, we've got to move out of here and get down to the LZ, and nobody said that, hey, we're going to die today or anything, but I could tell by the looks on people's faces that everybody was pretty much feeling the way I was feeling. I made it down to the end, and I was going to lead them basically back to the landing zone. But we all stayed together. We dragged bodies or wounded or whatever. Consistent theme in the Marine Corps. You never leave anybody behind, dead or alive or wounded or whatever. Once I decided to leave the Marine Corps, I made that decision before I really had made a decision about what I wanted to do. So the guy walks up to me and introduces himself, and he said he worked for the Secret Service. I said, well, have you ever thought about the Secret Service? And I said, well, not really. I don't even know what they do. So he told me a little bit about it, and I was a little older than the average agent because I had spent all these years in the Marine Corps, and a lot of the new agents were just out of college. And I had combat experience. I was a Marine Corps officer and all that. I think that was all kind of impressive. So I started in the Washington field office. And after a couple of years, they tried to get you some experience on a protective detail. And being in Washington, the two main protective details were the president's detail and the vice president's detail. And so I got a 30-day assignment to Vice President Agnew's detail. I knew that there was two major Secret Service offices that supported the protection mission, and one of them was the Intelligence Division, and one was the Technical Security Division. But I knew somebody pretty well, a supervisor in the Intelligence Division, so I called him up and I said, well, hey, I'm not cut out for this protection stuff for years on end. Can you get me into the Intelligence Division? And the Secretary of State was Henry Kissinger. And he and President Nixon were good buddies, but he talked President Nixon into having Secret Service protection. And so when he traveled to the Middle East, we sent an advance team over in advance to make security arrangements. And so they always had an intelligence agent from the Intelligence Division on that advance team that worked with the CIA and the local authorities and whatnot. And so I did a lot of traveling in the Middle East and as well as around the United States. After 2 years there, I got transferred out to Portland, Oregon. 4 years then in the Portland field office before I left the Secret Service, 1979, I guess it was. So